Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, usually when we pick a subject for these conversations, we are looking at a very specific lane. We look at a great general, or maybe a groundbreaking scientist, or a controversial politician.
Mm-hmm. It's neat. It's tidy.
It is. You know what box they fit into. But today feels like we're looking at a fictional character written by a screenwriter who just couldn't decide on a genre.
That is a very, very apt way to put it.
We are talking about a figure who, quite honestly, makes the most interesting man in the world look like he needs to get out more.
Yeah, if you pitch this guy's life as a movie script to a studio today, they would reject it. They would say it's too unrealistic, too cluttered.
Too much. No one would believe one person did all of this.
Exactly. We are diving into the life of Prince Rupert of the Rhine.
Yeah.
And you are right, it is. It's just the most insane CV of the 17th century.
Okay, just to give everyone a taste of the resume we're dealing with here, and I want to stress this is all one single human being.
Right.
We have a teenage cavalry commander who, basically revolutionized warfare.
Check. And a brilliant one at that.
Then we have a pirate who terrorized the Caribbean.
A very desperate, possibly malaria-ridden pirate, but yes, a pirate nonetheless.
Okay, we also have a colonial governor who basically drew the map of modern Canada.
The huge chunk of it, anyway.
Yeah. Then a high-level scientist, a chemist, a metallurgist who invented new weapons and alloys, a professional artist who invented new ways to print images, and my personal favorite.
Oh, I know which one you're going to say.
A man accused by half of England of being a literal wizard with a shape-shifting demon dog.
It's like the Forrest Gump of the 1600s. If Forrest Gump was 6'4", carried a sword, and understood high-level chemistry.
And that is really our mission for this deep dive. We aren't just reciting a biography here. We want to unpack how one human being could embody so many conflicting lives. I mean, how do you go from the brutality of a cavalry charge in the English Civil War to the delicate, quiet work of a laboratory in the Royal Society?
And, maybe more importantly, what does his life tell us about the world he lived in? Because Rupert, he really spans this gap between the old world of, knights and kings and divine right, and the new world of science, commerce, and global trade. He is the bridge between those two eras.
We have got a stack of sources here. We're looking at military archives from the Civil War, scientific journals from the Royal Society, even colonial charters. So let's start at the beginning. Where does a guy like this even come from?
Yeah.
Because despite the title Prince, this wasn't exactly a Disney fairy tale upbringing, was it?
Oh, far from it. I mean, to understand Rupert, you have to understand the absolute disaster into which he was born.
Okay.
He enters the world in Prague in 1619. His parents are Frederick V and Elizabeth Stuart. Now, Elizabeth is the daughter of James I of England, so Rupert is the grandson of the British king.
So he is blue-blooded royalty. He should be set for life.
The highest grade royalty. But his father, Frederick, made a gamble, a huge one. He accepted an offer to become the King of Bohemia.
That sounds like a good thing. A promotion.
It seemed like a power move, a way to elevate the family. But it was actually a trap. Taking that throne basically kicked off the 30 Years' War, which was this massive, devastating conflict that tore Europe apart for decades.
And how long did they actually get to enjoy being King and Queen of Bohemia? I feel like there's a catch here.
One winter.
One winter.
Just one. Hence the nickname you see in all the history books, the Winter King and Queen.
Wow.
They were royals for a season, the Holy Roman Emperor's forces came crushing in, and the collapse was sudden and just violent.
I read the story in the notes about their escape from Prague, and it sounds like an action movie scene. The enemy is literally at the gates, the court is fleeing in panic, and they forget something, or someone.
They almost forgot Rupert. The baby. He was just an infant, less than a year old. In the frantic rush to load the carriages, pack the jewels, escape the advancing army, the nursemaids apparently just set him down.
They left the baby behind.
For a minute, yeah. The carriages started rolling away, picking up speed. And the sources say a courtier named Christopher Dona heard the child screaming, realized what had happened, ran back, grabbed the bundle.
Oh my God.
And literally tossed the prince into the boot of a moving carriage at the last second, as they were speeding away.
Talk about a dramatic entrance to the world.
Yeah.
Welcome to life, kid. Try not to get left behind.
So that sets the tone.
Yeah.
He goes from a palace to
exile.
Permanent exile. Ended up in The Hague in the Netherlands. And this is so crucial for understanding his personality. He grew up as a prince, but a prince without a country.
Right.
The family was relying on pensions from relatives and, pawning their jewelry just to pay the rent and keep up appearances.
That is a weird psychological space to grow up in. You're told you're better than everyone else, you have this royal title, but you're broke and living on charity?
Exactly. It creates a massive chip on the shoulder. He had something to prove from day one. And to top it all off, his home life was cold. His mother, Elizabeth, was known to be quite distant. Yeah, the letters and records suggest she actually preferred her pet monkeys and dogs to her own children.
Ouch! Replaced by a monkey. That's got to do wonders for your self-esteem.
It meant Rupert and his siblings were raised primarily by French governors and tutors. The education was rigorous, though. We're talking strict Calvinism, so very religious, very disciplined. He studied logic, mathematics, drawing, fortification.
So practical stuff, not just philosophy.
Very practical. And he wasn't just book smart, right? The notes mention he was a bit of a wild child. He was a handful. He earned a nickname in the court, Robert le Diable, Rupert the Devil. He was described as fiery, mischievous, just incredibly passionate. He hated Latin and Greek, the classic scholar subjects, but he was brilliant at math and drawing.
And physically, he was an anomaly. You mentioned his height.
He grew incredibly fast. By the time he was 18, he was about 6'4".
In 1630s. That's,
Yeah.
I mean, that's NBA size in an era where the average man was probably 5'6" or 5'7".
He would have towered over almost everyone on the battlefield. And that is exactly where he went. He didn't really have a teenage phase. He went straight into the war.
At what age?
He was fighting in the 80 Years' War and the 30 Years' War while he was still a teenager. He was at the siege of Rheinberg at age 14.
14 years old, standing in a trench, getting shot at. It's just a different world.
It was his only career option. As the younger son of a deposed king, he had to fight for a living. He was essentially a high-class mercenary. But this early military career hit a major speed bump.
Right, in 1638, the Battle of Lotho.
Exactly. He was trying to help his brother reclaim their father's lands.
Yeah.
It went terribly.
What happened?
Well, Rupert fought like a demon. The accounts say he cut his way through the enemy ranks. But he was surrounded, his horse was killed, and he was captured by the imperial forces.
So now the giant teenager is a prisoner of war.
For 3 years. He was imprisoned in the castle at Linz. But, and this is important, we have to adjust our modern idea of prison.
So he wasn't in a dungeon breaking rocks.
No, he was a valuable royal hostage. The emperor actually tried to recruit him. They offered him freedom, a command in the imperial army, huge estates, on one condition.
Let me guess.
Religion.
He had to convert to Catholicism. And that's a pretty touching offer for a Brooke exile. Sell out your religion, get rich, get out of jail.
And he said no.
He refused. He held firm to his Calvinist faith. So he settled in for the long haul, and this imprisonment is actually where we see the Renaissance man start to emerge. He treated it like a university.
What does he do?
He played tennis, he practiced his shooting, he read military textbooks, and he really focused on his art, specifically etching.
And I saw a note here about a romance in prison.
Yes, with the jailer's daughter, Susan Kufstein. It sounds like something out of a novel, doesn't it?
It really does.
But perhaps the most significant relationship he formed in prison, and the one that would haunt his reputation later, was with a dog.
Ah, here we go.
Yeah.
The dog. I feel like this dog needs his own deep dive. He probably does. Rupert was gifted a rare white hunting poodle by an English admirer while he was in prison.
Now, when we say poodle, we're not talking about the perfectly groomed, poofy show dogs we see today.
Yeah, not at all. This was a standard poodle, a proper hunting dog. Smart, agile, tough, a water retriever. He named him Boy.
Just boy.
Or poodle, German word for poodle. He kept it simple. But this dog became his shadow. He taught it tricks. It slept in his bed. When Rupert was finally released in 1641 after promising not to fight against the emperor again, he took Boy with him.
And that dog was about to become the most famous animal in British history.
The most infamous, maybe.
Right, because this is the pivot point. Rupert is out of prison. He had his giant white dog. He's 23 years old. And his uncle, King Charles I of England, is in deep, deep trouble.
The English Civil War is kicking off in 1642. It's the king versus Parliament. It's a messy, brutal conflict over who actually runs the country. Charles summons Rupert.
And when Rupert arrives, he brings something the English hadn't seen before.
He brings modern European warfare. The English hadn't fought a major war on their own soil in a long, long time. Their tactics were outdated almost. Polite warfare, in a way. Rupert shows up with the brutal experience of the 30 Years' War. Charles immediately appoints him general force.
He puts a 23-year-old in charge of the entire cavalry. That seems incredibly risky.
It was a gamble, but it paid off instantly. Rupert introduced shock tactics.
Okay, break that down for us. What's the difference between what the English were doing and what Rupert told them to do?
Okay, so the traditional English method at the time was called the caracole. Cavalry would ride up to the enemy, fire their pistols, wheel around, ride to the back to reload, and the next rank would come up.
So it's basically a drive-by shooting on horseback. Very slow.
Exactly. It was slow, it was static. Rupert said, no, put the pistols away. He taught them the Swedish tactic he'd seen in Europe. You form a tight line, knee to knee, you draw swords, and you charge at a full gallop directly into the enemy infantry.
You turn the horse itself into a projectile.
Precisely. It's physics and terror. A wall of horse and steel hitting you at 30 miles per hour. It just shattered the parliamentarian lines. At the Battle of Edge Hill, the first major fight, Rupert's charge just evaporated the enemy wing. It was terrifying to behold.
But this is where the flaw in his genius appears, isn't it? I've heard it described that he had the go button, but no stop button.
That is the classic criticism, and it is largely valid. At Edge Hill, his men smashed the enemy, but then they kept going.
They didn't reform.
Nope. They chased the fleeing troops for miles. They stopped to loot the baggage train. Meanwhile, back on the actual battlefield, the king's infantry was left exposed and got hammered.
So he won the moment but almost lost the battle because he couldn't control the chaos he created.
The recurring theme. He was a brilliant tactician, but an undisciplined commander.
And arrogant.
Yes.
Oh, so arrogant. He became the archetype of the Cavalier. Long hair, lace collars, flamboyant dress, incredibly brave, but looking down his nose at everyone.
He didn't suffer fools, and he thought most of the English commanders were fools, pretty much. And this is where the propaganda machine kicks into high gear. Because the parliamentarians, the Roundheads, they were terrified of him, but they were oddly obsessed with the dog.
Right. It's a fascinating case study in 17th century fake news.
It really is. The parliamentarian writers needed to dehumanize Rupert because he was beating them so badly. So they targeted Boy. They published these pamphlets claiming this white poodle was a familiar.
A witch is familiar, a demon in animal form.
Exactly. I looked at some of the claims in the source material, and they are just wild. They said the dog could catch bullets.
Catch bullets in his mouth, find hidden treasure, prophesy the future. They claimed Rupert spoke to the dog in a secret language, and the dog gave him tactical advice before battles.
My favorite one is the shapeshifter theory. It's just so out there.
Oh, the Lapland lady. Yes, please tell me about the Lapland lady.
So one pamphlet claimed the dog was actually a beautiful witch from Lapland who could shapeshift into a white dog to protect the prince, and that she. Well, let's just say they implied the relationship was very close.
That is, wow. Politics hasn't changed much, has it? Just make up the craziest thing possible to discredit your opponent.
And the Royalists didn't help. They thought it was hilarious. They leaned into it. Rupert would have the dog sit at the dinner table during councils of war. It just added to his aura of invincibility. I have a magic dog. What do you have?
But being that scary has a downside. He wasn't just known as a wizard, he was known as the Prince Robber.
Yes. This is the darker side of his legacy in the war. Rupert brought total war to England. In Europe, armies lived off the land, which meant taking food and money from civilians.
A kind of sanctioned looting.
In England, that was seen as a war crime. Their wars hadn't been like that. So when Rupert demanded money from Leicester to not sack the city, or when he attacked Birmingham, it was a shock to the system.
Let's talk about the incident at Birmingham, the burning of Birmingham.
Rupert attacked the town, and in the chaos of the fighting, a huge portion of it burned down. The parliamentarians immediately painted him as a monster who willfully torched innocent people's homes.
And was it willful? What do the sources say?
They're split. It is likely he lost control of his men. Again, that discipline issue, or that fire simply started during the street fighting and spread naturally. But the label stuck. He was the bloody prince. He was seen as a foreign mercenary wrecking England.
And eventually, the war turns. The parliamentarians get their act together. They form the new model army. They get disciplined. They get Oliver Cromwell.
And Rupert's luck runs out. The real turning point for him personally is the surrender of Bristol in 1645.
Right. Bristol was a key port, the second city of the kingdom.
Exactly. Rupert was in charge of defending it. But he looked at the situation. There was plague in the city. The walls were weak. He was outnumbered. And he knew fighting meant a massacre of the civilians and his men. So he surrendered to save lives.
That seems like a rational military decision.
It was. But King Charles saw it as treason. He was devastated. He fired Rupert. just like that. He dismissed him from all command and revoked his passports.
Imagine that. You fight for your uncle for 3 years. You become the most hated man in the country for him, and then he fires you for making a rational choice to save lives.
Rupert did not handle it well. He actually rode through enemy territory, fighting skirmishes along the way, just to get to the king and demand a court-martial. He forced the king to listen to him.
I'm not leaving until you admit I was right.
And he won. The court-martial exonerated him completely. But it didn't matter. The war was lost by then. And then the final personal blow came. At the Battle of Marston Moor, which is a total disaster for the Royalists, Boy escaped his leash in the camp.
Oh,
He ran onto the battlefield, apparently looking for Rupert, and he was shot and killed.
that's just tragic.
The parliamentarians celebrated it like they had killed a general. They circulated pictures of the dead dog with captions like, "The devil is dead." It broke Rupert's heart. It was the end of the magic for him, in a way.
So let's take stock. The war is lost. His dog is dead. His uncle the king is about to be captured and then executed. Rupert is banished. He's in his late 20s. Most people would just go find a quiet cottage in France and retire.
But not Rupert.
Rupert decides to become a pirate.
Privateer is the polite term he would have used. But yes, a pirate. He refused to give up the fight. During the interregnum, the period when Oliver Cromwell was running England as a republic grister, Rupert took command of the tattered remains of the Royalist fleet.
And this wasn't a glorious adventure, was it? We aren't talking Jack Sparrow here. This was grim.
No, this is one of the most grueling parts of his life. They were starving, their ships were rotting and leaking. They were sailing from Ireland to Portugal to the Mediterranean, basically stealing any ship and cargo they could find to sell.
Just to fund the exiled court?
Exactly. To send money to the exiled Charles II. And all this time, they're being hunted by the English Navy.
Relentlessly. Admiral Robert Blake, who was a brilliant parliamentarian commander, was chasing them everywhere.
He was. Eventually, Rupert realizes Europe is too hot. They can't stay there. So he decides to cross the Atlantic. He goes to West Africa first, to the Gambia.
What on earth was the plan there?
Gold. He had heard rumors of a mountain of gold. He took his fleet up the Gambia River. But instead of gold, they found malaria. Rupert almost died. He was delirious with fever for weeks.
And I read that he acquired a servant there who stayed with him for years.
Yes, a Moorish servant. The records don't give us his name, unfortunately. But he returned to England with Rupert and stayed with him for the rest of his life. But the trip was a bust. No gold. So they crossed the Atlantic to the Caribbean.
And this is where the Forrest Gump factor kicks in again. He's sailing around the Virgin Islands trying to pirate Spanish ships, and a massive hurricane hits.
I cannot even imagine being in a 17th century wooden ship in a Category 5 hurricane. It must have been catastrophic.
And this is where the real tragedy of his pirate years happens.
Yeah. His brother, Prince Maurice, was with him. Maurice was captaining a ship called the Defiance.
Maurice had been with him through the whole war,
Yeah.
right? They were
Everywhere. They were inseparable. And during the storm, in the pitch black, the Defiance disappeared.
gone.
Gone with all hands. Vanished. Rupert spent days searching the waters, refusing to leave the area, hoping to find a survivor, a piece of wreckage, anything. But he never did. He lost his brother to the sea.
It's a pattern. It seems like everyone he gets close to, he loses. His father, his dog, his uncle, and now his brother.
It took a heavy toll. When Rupert finally returned to Europe in 1653, he was exhausted. He was bitter. And to top it all off, he fell out with Charles II because the piracy campaign hadn't actually made much money.
It wasn't profitable.
No. The ships cost more to repair than the loot was worth.
So he's washed up. The warrior prince is now just an old, tired sailor with no money and no home.
It absolutely seemed that way. He spent a few years just wandering Germany, living off handouts. But then history flips again. 1660. The Restoration.
Cromwell is dead.
Cromwell is dead. The Republic collapses. Charles II is invited back to England to be king. The monarchy is restored, and Rupert comes home.
And this is my favorite pivot in the entire story, because he doesn't go back to being a general. He doesn't go back to being a pirate. He becomes a nerd.
A philosophic warrior, as he was called. Yes. He settles into Windsor Castle. He's made the constable of the castle, and he transforms his apartments into a high-tech laboratory.
Paint the picture for us. What does this place look like?
Oh, it sounds wonderful. The sources describe walls decorated with armor, pikes, and muskets, relics of the soldier's life. But then the tables are covered in glass tubes, crucibles, forges, and mathematical instruments.
It's like a Bond villain's lair, but for science.
It really is. And he's hanging out with the heavy hitters, right?
The heaviest. He becomes a founding member of the Royal Society. We're talking about the group that included Isaac Newton, Robert Hooke, Christopher Wren.
And Rupert wasn't just a royal mascot they kept around for funding. He was a genuine contributor. He was in the lab, doing the work.
Let's talk about the nuggets, the inventions, because some of these are mind-blowing for the 1660s. Start with the famous Prince Rupert's drops.
Okay, if you haven't seen these on a video, you really need to look them up. Rupert introduced these to England. They're these tadpole-shaped glass droplets made by dripping molten glass into a bucket of cold water.
And they have these very strange properties.
Crazy properties.
Oh.
Because the outside cools instantly and the inside is still hot, it creates immense internal stress, immense surface tension. The head of the drop is virtually indestructible. You can hit it with a hammer, you can shoot it, and it won't break. It's stronger than steel.
But there's a trick.
But if you nip the tail, just a tiny snap with a pair of pliers, the release of that tension causes the entire thing to explode into fine dust instantly. The fracture moves at something like 4,000 miles per hour.
And he'd use these as party tricks.
He'd use them to demonstrate physics to the king and the court. It was a party trick, but it was also deep science about material stress.
But he didn't just play with glass. He was making weapons. Of course he was.
Always a soldier. He invented a type of gunpowder that was claimed to be 10 times stronger than the standard issue. He designed a repeating gun with rotating barrels.
A revolver in the 1660s.
A proto-machine gun, essentially.
Yeah.
He also designed a diving engine, which was basically a torpedo for blowing up ships underwater. And he invented a new alloy called Prince's metal.
Right, a type of brass.
A form of brass that was highly resistant to corrosion, which made it perfect for naval artillery.
And I read something about surgical tools. This one really surprised me.
Yes. Remember I mentioned he was shot in the head in France during his exile years. He had to be trepanned, which is where they drill a hole in your skull to relieve pressure.
A horrifying procedure. I can't even imagine.
While he was recovering, he apparently decided the tools the doctors used were garbage, just completely inefficient. So he designed better surgical instruments for skull operations.
Doctor, your drill is inefficient. Here, let me design you a better one. The confidence of this man.
It's practical genius. He sees a problem, he invents a solution, and we haven't even touched the art. This is the soft side of Rupert. He is credited with popularizing mezzotint in England.
Okay, I am not an art major. Explain mezzotint to me like I'm 5.
Of course. So traditional engraving is drawing with lines. You scratch a line into a copper plate, ink goes in the line, you get a black line on white paper.
Simple enough.
Mezzotint is the exact opposite. You start by roughening the entire copper plate with a tool called a rocker. So if you printed it, it would be pitch black. Then you use a scraper and a burnisher to smooth out the parts that you want to be light.
So you're drawing with light out of darkness.
Exactly. It allows for incredible shading, velvet-like textures, and really moody, dramatic lighting. It was perfect for the Baroque style. Rupert's most famous work, The Great Executioner, is considered a masterpiece. It isn't just good for a prince, it's professional-grade art.
So we have the warrior, the pirate, the scientist, the artist. But we have one more life to cover. And this one is the reason why, if you live in Canada, you see the name Rupert absolutely everywhere.
This brings us to the business tycoon phase. Rupert became interested in the fur trade. He met 2 French explorers, Radisson and Groseilliers.
Right.
They had a theory that you could access the fur-rich interior of North America via the Hudson Bay, rather than going up the St. Lawrence River, which the French controlled.
And Rupert the risk-taker saw an opportunity.
A massive one. He formed a syndicate, invested his own money, and sent ships. When they came back with high-quality beaver pelts, he went to his cousin, King Charles II, and got a royal charter in 1670. The Hudson's Bay Company was born.
And the land grant in that charter, it wasn't small, was it?
It was astronomical. The king granted the company Rupert's land, and the charter defined this as all the land drained by rivers that flow into Hudson Bay.
Which they probably didn't realize at the time was.
No, they had no idea of the geography. That drainage basin covers about 40% of modern Canada. It stretches from Alberta to Quebec and south down into North Dakota and Minnesota. It was a third of a continent.
And Rupert owned it.
He was the first governor of the company. He effectively controlled a territory the size of Western Europe. And the great irony is, he never saw it. He never set foot in Canada. But his administrative decisions, his charter, shaped the political geography of North America for centuries.
That is just incredible. He's sitting in a lab in Windsor inventing skull drills and drawing mezzotints while simultaneously owning half of Canada.
And still finding time to go back to sea. In his 50s, he served as admiral during the Anglo-Dutch Wars. And again, he couldn't help but innovate. He developed aggressive naval doctrines, specifically the idea of breaking the enemy line rather than just sailing parallel to it.
Which is the tactic Nelson used to win the Battle of Trafalgar over a century later.
Exactly. Rupert was always pushing for the aggressive move, the decisive blow.
Did he ever settle down personally? We talked about the jailer's daughter, but did he ever marry?
He never married legitimately. He knew his role was to be the supportive cousin to the king, not to start a rival dynasty. But he did find happiness in his later years. He fell deeply in love with an actress named Peg Hughes.
An actress in the 1600s, that was scandal territory.
Huge scandal. Actresses were seen as, well, barely above prostitutes in the social hierarchy of the time. But Rupert didn't care. He was devoted to her. They lived together, and they had a daughter.
And he named her. Let me guess.
Ruperta.
Of course he did. He branded his own child.
And the domestic glimpse we get from the letters is really charming. The man who burned Birmingham, who raided the Gambia, who charged at Edge Hill. He writes about his daughter Ruperta. He says, quote, "She rules the whole house and sometimes argues with her mother, which makes us all laugh."
The terrifying Cavalier general being bossed around by a toddler.
It's a very human end to a superhuman life. He died in 1682 at his home in Westminster. He was given a state funeral and buried in Westminster Abbey.
So when we look back at this, how do we sum him up? Because usually we try to find a single thread. But here the thread is that there is no thread.
I think the contradiction is the thread. He was a mad cavalier who was accused of brutality, but also a sensitive artist who revolutionized printmaking.
Right. He was a pirate who raided for survival, but also a careful bureaucrat who managed the Royal Navy's logistics.
He is a man of extremes. He didn't do anything halfway.
No.
And it raises a really provocative thought for us today. We live in a world of hyper-specialization. You're a doctor, or you're a coder, or a soldier. You pick a lane and you stay in it. Rupert is a reminder of an era, perhaps a lost era, where a polymath prince could exist.
Which makes you wonder, was it his unique, once-in-a-generation genius, or was it the chaotic opportunity of the 17th century that allowed someone to be a general, an admiral, a pirate, or a governor, a scientist, and an artist all at once?
I think it was both. The chaos of the era created the vacuum, and Rupert had the sheer energy and intellect to fill it. He saw the world not as separate boxes, but as one big problem to be solved, whether that was winning a battle, fixing a skull, or drawing a picture.
I don't think we'll ever see a resume like that again. If you want to see a little piece of his legacy, seriously, go to a video site and search for Prince Rupert's drops being crushed by a hydraulic press. It is incredibly satisfying science.
It really is.
Or just pull up a map of Canada and count how many times you see the word Rupert.
You'll be counting for a while.
That's all for this deep dive into the wildlife of the Devil Prince. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.